No,
This child
that
is sick.
is not what I said. We just heard from...
Hey everyone, and thank you for joining me for another episode of Kimora. This episode is dedicated to the quote-unquote war on drugs. I personally believe that it's a war against the poor and a war against minorities. However, for the sake of being politically correct, in this video we will refer to it as the war on drugs. The war on drugs has been terrorizing the African American community for over 40 years now, so it's beyond time that we become educated and realize what it's doing to our people, especially young African American men, every day. Throughout this video, I'll cover everything from the Nixon administration, the Reagan administration, where it all began, down to important laws that we all should know, as well as solutions that it's going to take to truly end the war on drugs. I will warn you that this video is a tad bit longer than the average camera on Kimora. Nonetheless, it's important and it's vital, so make sure that you stay tuned until the end. The phrase war on drugs was coined by President Nixon in 1971, mimicking President Johnson's declaration on the war on poverty 7 years earlier. Contrary to popular belief, it was not due to extreme drug abuse in the ghettos or Woodstock festivals, but by addiction among soldiers fighting in Vietnam. Drug abuse, said the president, was public enemy number one.
We must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number one in the United States, the problem of dangerous drugs.
Marijuana was the drug of choice of American soldiers during the Vietnam War. In 1968, a major government initiative forced the Army to crack down on marijuana use. At that time, officials believed marijuana would eventually cause long-term psychological damage. By this point, the use of the drug had become far too prevalent for the Army to effectively combat. Army arrests had reached 1,000 per week at its height, and treatment centers were bursting at the seams. Nixon saw the remedy to this problem being federal demand reduction programs and drug treatment programs. All hell broke loose in the war on drugs as we knew it then when President Reagan came into office, coincidentally around the same time that crack hit American streets. In 1981, President Reagan convinced Congress to pass a law which, in a nutshell, encouraged the military to give local, state, and federal police military equipment, training, and technology in support of the war on drugs, thus the birth of SWAT teams across the country. Then came the 1984 Sentencing Reform Act, along with the law of 1986 that created the minimum sentencing disparity between crack, which was more common amongst African Americans, and cocaine, which was much popular with whites. Thanks to this law, if one was caught with 5 grams of crack, he or she would be automatically sentenced to 5 years in prison. However, to get 5 years in prison for a cocaine possession, one would need to be in possession of at least 500 grams before being automatically sentenced to 5 years in prison. African Americans only make up 12% of the United States population. They're only 13% of the monthly drug users here. But yet they represent 74% of those sentenced to prison for drug possession.
Cops give a damn about a Negro. Pull a trigger, kill a nigga, he's a hero. Get it back to the kids who the hell cares. One less hungry mouth on the welfare.
A 2007 study of Florida autopsies found that cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamines caused 989 deaths, while legal drugs associated with more well-off drug users, like Vicodin and Oxycontin, caused 2,328 deaths. Regardless of the amount of marijuana that a person can possibly eat or smoke, will never constitute a lethal dose, yet it's illegal and it causes the long-term incarceration of hundreds of thousands of black men every year. 1 in every 14 African American men were behind bars in 2006, compared to 1 in every 106 Caucasian men that were behind bars in 2006. Now, I'd be a fool to believe that African Americans commit that much more crime than their white counterparts. Doesn't happen. But what does happen is that they are targeted more than their white counterparts. They are arrested more than their white counterparts. They are convicted more than their white counterparts, and they are sentenced to longer prison terms than their white counterparts, thanks to the war on drugs.
It ain't a secret, don't conceal the fact. The penitentiary's packed and it's filled with blacks.
It's perfectly legal for police to stop you for a minor traffic violation just as an excuse to search for drugs, even if there's no indication or evidence whatsoever that a motorist has been engaged in an illegal drug crime. Believe it or not, it's perfectly legal to use race discrimination in policing. It is virtually impossible for victims of racial discrimination at the hands of the police to sue under the law now. In closing, we must realize that the same people who are most harmed by the failures of the war on drugs and the failures of our criminal justice system are the very same people who have the least amount of power to change it. We as a country need to revert back into the days in which drug abuse was treated as a medical condition and not a criminal offense. We need correctional programs that promote personal responsibility and give offenders a fair chance at success after prison rather than making their lives a living hell after they've allegedly already paid their debt to society. The Fair Sentencing Act, signed into law by President Barack Obama in August of 2010, has dramatically reduced the disparity mandatory sentences between powder and crack cocaine. However, the law was not retroactive, so needless to say, there is still plenty of work for us to do. Share everything that you've learned about the war on drugs in this video with somebody. Send this video to a family member, a friend, a colleague, an enemy. Send it to everyone. Because just as Michelle Alexander put it perfectly, this mass incarceration that we're facing every day is definitely the new Jim Crow.